One evening, everything changed. She came home later than usual, her face flushed and her hair disheveled. "Traffic," she muttered, brushing past me and heading straight for the shower. I was about to let it slide again, when her phone lit up on the counter. A message from someone named Mark. A message I'll never forget. "Can't wait to see you again, babe. Last night was amazing." My stomach sank. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and scrolled through their conversation. There it was, proof of her betrayal. Explicit texts, secret rendezvous, plans for weekends I thought she was spending with her so-called work friends. My first reaction wasn't rage. It was disbelief. How could the woman who once looked me in the eye and promised to love me, honor me, and forsake all others be the same woman sexting some random guy behind my back? When she came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her like she hadn't a care in the world, I confronted her. "Who the hell is Mark?" I asked, holding up her phone. For a split second, I saw panic in her eyes. But then, like a switch flipping, she sneered. "You've been snooping through my phone? That's pathetic, James." "Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "You've been cheating on me, Laura. Don't you dare act like I'm the bad guy here." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, grow up. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for excitement." Her words hit me like a freight train. This wasn't guilt or regret. It was pure contempt. I realized in that moment that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built my life around, was a stranger. A cruel, selfish stranger. But I didn't let her see me break. I squared my shoulders and gave her the coldest look I could muster. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice steady. "I promise you, Laura, you'll regret every lie, every betrayal, every ounce of disrespect you've shown me." Her laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Good luck with that," she said, grabbing her phone and storming out of the room. But as I stood there, fists clenched and heart racing, I wasn't thinking about luck. I was already planning my revenge. The days after our confrontation were like living with a snake. Laura didn't apologize, didn't even try to salvage what we had. Instead, she doubled down, twisting the narrative to make herself the victim. She told her friends, our friends, that I was controlling, obsessive, a jealous husband who had finally snapped. I heard the whispers when I went to the gym, saw the sideways glances at the grocery store. Somehow, she had painted me as the villain. And she did it with the ease of someone who had played this game before. Laura wasn't stupid. She knew how to manipulate people, how to wear masks that suited her needs. To the outside world, she was the charming, ambitious wife who was trapped in a marriage with an insecure man. Behind closed doors, though, she was venomous. One night, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring at the family photos on the wall. There we were, smiling on our honeymoon in Hawaii, at the lake house with her parents, at her company's holiday party. I tried to pinpoint the moment it all fell apart, when had the warmth in her eyes turned into the ice-cold contempt she now directed at me. The next morning, she strutted into the kitchen, phone in hand, typing away like nothing had happened. She didn't even glance in my direction as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "I'll be out late tonight," she said casually, as if her late nights hadn't already become the norm. "Another meeting with Mark?" I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. She froze for a split second, then turned to face me with a smirk. "You're still on about that? God, James, let it go. You're embarrassing yourself." I stood up, leveling her with a stare that I knew made people uncomfortable. "You think this is over, Laura? You think you can waltz around like this without consequences?" She laughed, actually laughed. "What are you going to do, James? Cry about it? Write me a sternly worded email?" She shook her head, her condescension practically oozing from her pores. "Face it, you're powerless." Her words stung, but they also steeled my resolve. Powerless? She had no idea. After she left for work, or whatever it was she actually did during the day, I started digging. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her destroy me. No, I was going to pull the rug out from under her so hard she wouldn't see it coming. I started with her phone. No, I hadn't snooped before. Her accusations of that were just another one of her manipulative tactics. But now, all bets were off. I had access to our shared phone plan and pulled the records. There it was, dozens of calls and texts to Mark at all hours of the day and night. Then I went deeper. Emails, bank statements, receipts. I found evidence of hotel stays, lavish dinners, even a pair of earrings she charged to our account. The same earrings I'd noticed her wearing recently but hadn't thought much about. But the kicker? I discovered she'd been siphoning money from our joint savings account into her own private account for months. Thousands of dollars. Money we'd planned to use for a dream vacation, for home renovations, for our future, gone. By the time she came home that evening, my anger had been replaced with something far colder. Calculation. "How was your night?" I asked when she walked in, my tone casual. "Fine," she said, brushing past me. "Good," I replied, hiding the smirk that tugged at the corners of my mouth. "Because it's going to be one of your last good nights for a while." She paused, halfway up the stairs, and turned to glare at me. What the hell is that supposed to mean? "Don't worry," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You'll find out soon enough." For the first time in weeks, she looked uneasy. And that was just the beginning. I spent the next few days laying the groundwork. Laura thought she had me figured out, thought I was too spineless, too broken to fight back. But she underestimated me. That was her first mistake. I began documenting everything. I printed out phone records, screenshots of her messages with Mark, and receipts for the hotels. I even installed a small camera in the living room to capture her late-night phone calls, just in case she got careless enough to take them at home. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about having irrefutable proof. Then I started reaching out to the people in her life. Her work friends, her family, even Mark's wife. Yes, the man she was sleeping with had a wife, something Laura conveniently forgot to mention. I didn't confront them directly, not yet. Instead, I planted seeds. Anonymous messages here, a cryptic comment there. By the time I was ready to strike, they'd already be suspicious. But I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was also making moves to protect myself. I met with a lawyer, a shark of a man who specialized in divorce and asset protection. He didn't bat an eye when I explained the situation. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "She's made it easy for you," he said. "All you have to do is follow through." And follow through I did. The night everything came to a head, I set the stage perfectly. Laura was in the shower, humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. I took her phone, unlocked with the same passcode she'd been using for years, and sent a message to Mark. "Let's meet at the hotel tonight. Usual time." I deleted the message and put the phone back where I found it. When she came downstairs, I played it cool. "Going out again tonight?" I asked, sipping my beer. "Yeah, late work meeting," she said, not even bothering to make it sound convincing. I nodded. "Have fun." She didn't know I'd already booked a room at the same hotel under a fake name. That night, I arrived at the hotel early and waited in the lobby. Sure enough, Laura walked in around 8 p.m., dressed to the nines. She didn't see me as she headed straight for the elevator. I waited a few minutes before following. By the time I got to the floor, I could hear their voices through the slightly ajar door of the room. Laughing, flirting, the sounds of two people without a shred of guilt. I pulled out my phone and recorded everything, from the hallway, of course. Once I had enough, I knocked on the door. The laughter stopped. A moment later, Laura opened the door, her face going pale the second she saw me. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, trying to block the view of Mark behind her. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice calm and icy. I stepped forward, forcing her to back into the room. Mark stood there, frozen, his shirt half unbuttoned. "You two look cozy," I said, glancing around. "Mind if I join?" Laura's composure cracked. "James, just leave. We'll talk about this later." I laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Oh, we'll definitely talk about this later. But for now, I suggest you both get dressed. Security's on their way." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't." I raised my phone, showing her the recording. "I already did." Mark bolted for the bathroom, muttering something about this being a mistake. Laura, for once, was speechless. I didn't stick around to watch them scramble. I had bigger plans for the fallout. By the time I got home that night, I knew the dominoes had already started to fall. Laura was still at the hotel, probably trying to salvage whatever was left of her ego while Mark panicked in the corner. I didn't care. I had everything I needed. The next morning, she walked into the house like nothing had happened. Her hair was still damp from what I assumed was a hurried shower at the hotel. She didn't even look at me as she grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," I said, leaning against the counter. She sighed, not even bothering to feign remorse. "Look, James, I know what you think you saw." I cut her off. Don't insult my intelligence. I've got the proof, Laura. Every text, every call, every receipt. I've got video from last night. So spare me the gaslighting." Her face hardened. "Fine," she snapped. "What do you want, James? An apology? Some grand confession? You're not getting it. I'm not sorry. You weren't enough, okay? You never were." That hurt, but I didn't let it show. Not enough? Funny, because I'm more than enough to ruin you. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. What are you going to do? Post the videos online? Run to my boss? Go ahead. Do your worst." That's when I smiled. She had no idea just how much damage I could do. "Already did," I said, my voice steady. "I sent everything to Mark's wife this morning. She was very appreciative. You might want to check your phone. She's probably blowing it up right now." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the onslaught of messages. "You son of a bitch," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Oh, and that's not all," I continued, savoring the moment. "Your boss? He's getting a package too. Something tells me he won't look kindly on an employee using company credit cards for hotel rooms and dinners with her lover." She slammed her phone down on the table. "You're ruining my life." "No, Laura," I said coldly. "You ruined it yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." She stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I didn't chase her. I had more pressing matters to attend to. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer again. With the evidence I'd gathered, the divorce would be swift and brutal. Laura had siphoned money from our accounts, committed financial fraud, and blatantly violated the terms of our marriage. Legally, she didn't stand a chance. But the real kicker? I'd found out that her precious Mark wasn't just any man. He was her boss. The same boss who was married with 3 kids. It didn't take long for the news to spread. By the end of the week, Mark's wife had filed for divorce, Laura had been fired, and their sordid affair was the talk of the town. When Laura came home that evening, she was a shadow of the woman who had taunted me just days before. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and her eyes were red from crying. "James, please," she said, her voice breaking. "You've made your point. Just stop. I'll do whatever you want." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch until she squirmed. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to pack your things and get out of my house. Tonight." "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "I don't care," I replied. "But if you're not gone by morning, I'll call the cops and have you removed." For once, she didn't argue. That night, Laura packed her things in silence. The arrogance, the sneers, the biting comments, gone. She looked hollow, almost unrecognizable. But I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. Whatever part of me had once cared about her had been ground into dust beneath the weight of her betrayal. As I watched her shuffle through the house, stuffing clothes into suitcases and hastily grabbing whatever she could, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She kept glancing at me, as if hoping I'd soften, but I never gave her the chance. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" I finally asked, more out of logistical curiosity than concern. She froze, a t-shirt dangling from her hand. "I'll figure something out," she muttered. "Good," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Because you're not welcome here anymore." Her face twisted in a mix of anger and desperation. "You don't have to be so cruel, James." "Cruel?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You cheated, lied, stole from me, and humiliated me. And you want to talk about cruelty? You're lucky I haven't done worse." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, she turned back to her packing, her shoulders slumped. By midnight, she was gone. I watched from the front porch as she loaded her suitcases into the back of her car. She hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the driver's door, as if she was about to say something. But then she got in, started the engine, and drove off into the night. I stood there for a long time after she left, the cold wind biting at my skin. The house was finally quiet, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like something else entirely, something darker. The next morning, I started cleaning out the remnants of her presence. Her perfume bottles on the bathroom counter, the clothes she'd left behind, the wedding photos that now felt like a mockery of everything we'd once promised each other. It was cathartic, almost therapeutic, but it wasn't enough. I needed to make sure she couldn't claw her way back. That's when I made the call, to our bank, to our credit card companies, to our lawyer. I froze every account she had access to, canceled her cards, and changed the locks on the house. By the afternoon, I received a text from Mark's wife. "Thank you for everything you sent me. It confirmed what I suspected. I'm filing for divorce today. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. I didn't need anything from her, but it was nice to know that Laura wasn't the only one paying the price for her actions. Later that week, I got a call from one of Laura's friends, one of the few who hadn't taken her side. "She's staying with some coworker," the friend said. "Apparently, things are really bad for her right now. She lost her job. Mark won't return her calls, and his wife is threatening to go public with everything." "Good," I said simply. "You really aren't going to forgive her, are you?" the friend asked hesitantly. "Why should I?" I replied. "She didn't just betray me. She burned everything we built to the ground. Forgiveness is out of the question." The friend didn't argue. By the end of the week, my house was mine again. No more Laura, no more lies, no more chaos. But deep down, I knew I wasn't finished. Not yet. With Laura out of my house and the immediate fallout well underway, I realized there was one more step I needed to take. She had been dismantling my life for months, quietly eroding the foundation we built together while ensuring her own safety net was in place. If she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was sorely mistaken. I still had the ace up my sleeve, the private account she had been siphoning money into. I had already handed the details over to my lawyer, who assured me we could use it in the divorce proceedings. But I wasn't content with just a legal victory. I wanted her to feel the consequences in every part of her life. The first thing I did was contact her parents. Laura always kept a polished image for them. She was the golden child, the successful career woman with the perfect marriage. Her mother adored me and used to tell me how lucky Laura was to have someone so stable and dependable. They had no idea who their daughter really was. I called them on a Sunday afternoon. Her mother picked up, her voice warm and friendly. "James, it's so nice to hear from you. How are you and Laura doing?" "We're getting divorced," I said bluntly. There was no point sugarcoating it. The line went silent for a moment. "What? Why? What happened?" "She's been cheating on me," I said, my tone calm but firm. "With her boss, Mark. It's been going on for months. She's also been stealing money from our accounts and lying to everyone about it." Her mother gasped. That can't be true. Laura wouldn't do something like that." "I wish it weren't," I replied. "But I have all the proof. I'm sending it to you now." I could hear the ping of her phone as the photos, screenshots, and videos I had compiled flooded her inbox. For the next several minutes, there was nothing but the sound of her mother's shaky breathing and muffled sobs. "This isn't the daughter I raised," she whispered finally. "No," I said, "it's not." Next, I turned my attention to Mark. He might have been the catalyst for Laura's infidelity, but I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed either. I compiled everything I had on him and sent it to his company's HR department, along with a detailed letter explaining how he had violated company policies by engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. By the end of the week, Mark was out of a job. His wife's divorce proceedings were in full swing, and rumors about his affair were spreading like wildfire. Laura might have thought she could rely on him as her safety net, but that net had been shredded beyond repair. And then, there was Laura's reputation. She had built her career and social standing on a carefully crafted image of professionalism and charm. I made sure to dismantle that as well. Every friend, every colleague, every mutual connection we had. None of them were spared the truth. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I simply laid out the facts and let the evidence speak for itself. By the time I was done, Laura's name was mud. She was jobless, homeless, and isolated, with no one left to turn to. Her carefully constructed life had crumbled into dust, just as mine had the moment I discovered her betrayal. Late one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Laura. "Are you happy now? You've destroyed me." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "You destroyed yourself, Laura. I just made sure everyone saw the truth." She didn't respond. I thought I'd seen the last of Laura. She'd been stripped of her job, her reputation, and her dignity. She was staying with some distant coworker, barely scraping by, and avoiding every corner of the town we once called home. But of course, someone like Laura wasn't going to go down quietly. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when the knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before opening it. When I did, there she was, soaked to the bone, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her once proud posture now hunched with desperation. "James," she choked out, her voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What could you possibly have to say to me, Laura?" She flinched at the coldness in my voice, but pushed forward anyway. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, her voice breaking. "I've lost everything. My job, my friends, even Mark." She spat his name like it tasted bitter. "I was wrong, James. I see that now. I see how much I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry." I stared at her, unmoved. "Sorry doesn't fix anything." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Please, James, give me one more chance. I'll be the wife you deserve." It was almost laughable. The same woman who had mocked me, belittled me, and cheated on me was now begging at my doorstep like a lost puppy. But her apology didn't stir even a flicker of sympathy in me. "Why should I believe a word you say?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You didn't care about me when you were sneaking around with Mark. You didn't care about me when you were siphoning money out of our accounts. You only care now because you've run out of options." Her lips trembled, and she dropped her gaze to the ground. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you, James. I've always loved you." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Love? Don't insult me, Laura. You don't know the first thing about love." "Please," she said, stepping closer. "We can start over. I'll prove it to you." I raised a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "You proved everything I needed to know about you the second you betrayed me. And you've got a lot of nerve showing up here, thinking I'd just take you back." Her face crumpled, and she dropped to her knees on the porch. "James, I'm begging you. I don't have anyone else." "That's not my problem," I said coldly. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." She stayed there for a moment, sobbing in the rain, before finally picking herself up and walking away. As she disappeared down the street, a strange sense of closure washed over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and refusing to let her toxic presence poison it any longer. But I knew Laura too well to think this was the end. Desperation makes people dangerous, and I had a feeling she wasn't finished yet. I should have known Laura wouldn't go quietly. A week after her dramatic appearance on my doorstep, I found myself in the middle of her final, desperate scheme to drag me down with her. It started with a phone call from my boss. I was in the middle of reviewing a contract when his number popped up on my screen. His tone was serious, almost accusatory, as he said, "James, can you come into my office? We need to talk." The knot in my stomach tightened as I made my way to his office. I hadn't done anything wrong, but there was a heaviness to his voice that put me on edge. When I walked in, he slid a manila envelope across the desk. "I got this in the mail today. Care to explain?" I opened the envelope and felt my blood run cold. Inside were printed screenshots of emails and messages, fabricated ones, supposedly from me, talking about embezzling money from the company. There were even fake invoices and doctored spreadsheets to back up the claim. Laura's handiwork. It was obvious. "She's desperate," I said aloud, though I didn't use her name. "My ex-wife. She's trying to ruin me because I exposed her for cheating. My boss leaned back in his chair, eyeing me skeptically. That's a pretty serious accusation, James. It's the truth, I replied firmly, and I can prove it. I spent the next several hours compiling evidence. I showed my boss the text Laura had sent me, begging for reconciliation, and explained her pattern of behavior. I even pulled up messages she'd sent mutual friends, trash-talking me after our split. But the real nail in the coffin came from the metadata on the fake emails. With a little digging and help from an IT friend, I traced the IP address to the coworker's house where Laura had been staying. When I presented my findings, my boss's expression softened. "Looks like you've got a vindictive ex on your hands," he said. "I'll handle this. Just focus on your work." That night, I called Laura. She didn't answer, of course, but I left a voicemail that was icy in its precision. "Laura, I know what you tried to do," I said. "It didn't work. If you ever come near my life, my job, or my reputation again, I will take legal action. This is your only warning." The next day, I filed a restraining order. It wasn't hard to prove her harassment, especially after the stunt she pulled with my boss. When the papers were served, I heard through the grapevine that she'd completely unraveled, screaming, crying, calling me every name in the book. But I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. By the end of the week, Laura was gone, completely. She left town, blocked by everyone who had once been in her corner, and disappeared into obscurity. I knew better than to think this would erase all the damage she had done, but at least now, I had my life back. And as I stood on my porch that evening, watching the sunset, I realized something else. I had one. With Laura finally out of the picture, I was left with the ruins of what used to be my life. The house was quiet, too quiet, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of her absence anymore. It was the quiet of a clean slate. I spent the first few weeks focusing on practical things, changing the locks, repainting the walls, donating every item that reminded me of her. The physical act of erasing her from my life felt therapeutic, like I was reclaiming my space. The nights were harder. That's when the memories crept in, the good ones and the bad. I'd sit in the living room, staring at the empty spot on the couch where she used to curl up, and wonder how I'd let things get so far. How had I missed the warning signs? How had I allowed myself to believe in a woman who had been lying to my face for months? But I didn't let those thoughts consume me. Instead, I funneled my energy into the one thing Laura had tried to destroy: my career. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, took on extra responsibilities, and started networking more aggressively. My boss, still impressed by how I'd handled the situation with Laura's false accusations, gave me his full support. Within 6 months, I was promoted. The raise was nice, but what really mattered was the sense of accomplishment. Laura had tried to tear me down, but I'd come out stronger. As my professional life flourished, I started working on myself, too. Therapy was a big part of that. At first, I was hesitant to open up to a stranger about everything that had happened, but my therapist helped me unpack the betrayal, the anger, and the lingering doubts about my own judgment. "You're not responsible for her choices," my therapist said during one session. "You can't control how someone else behaves. What you can control is how you move forward." Those words stuck with me. Moving forward meant reconnecting with the parts of myself I'd neglected during my marriage. I started playing guitar again, something I hadn't done in years. I joined a local hiking group and spent weekends exploring trails I never knew existed. I even adopted a dog, a scrappy little mutt named Max, who quickly became my best companion. The more I focused on myself, the less power Laura's betrayal had over me. It was like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. One night, about a year after Laura left, I found myself sitting on the porch with Max at my feet, a beer in hand, and a quiet sense of contentment in my chest. The scars were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. A year had passed since Laura had been erased from my life. The days were brighter, the nights quieter, and my world felt stable for the first time in a long time. I was finally starting to feel whole again. That's why it was so jarring when someone from her past showed up on my doorstep, bringing with them a storm I thought I'd left behind. It was a Saturday afternoon. Max and I had just come back from a long hike, and I was wiping the mud off his paws when the knock came at the door. At first, I thought it might be a delivery or one of my neighbors. But when I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a man I'd only seen in photos. Mark, Laura's former lover, the man who had blown up my marriage and lost everything in the process, stood on my porch, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and his eyes darted nervously as if he expected me to slam the door in his face. "James," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need to talk to you." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "You've got some nerve showing up here." "I know," he said quickly, holding up his hands, "and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." I raised an eyebrow. "Important to who?" "Because I don't see how you matter to me." Mark hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, I know I screwed up. I'm not here to make excuses or ask for forgiveness. I need to tell you something about Laura." The mention of her name was enough to make my stomach churn, but curiosity got the better of me. "You've got 5 minutes," I said, stepping aside to let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, an uncomfortable tension hanging in the air. Mark fidgeted with his hands, avoiding my gaze. "Laura contacted me a few weeks ago," he began. She's not doing well." I snorted. "Not my problem." "I know," he said quickly, "but she's desperate. She told me she blames both of us for what happened. Her losing her job, her friends, everything." I felt a flicker of anger. She destroyed her own life, Mark. She lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone around her. "Don't you dare try to pin this on me." "I'm not," he said, his voice trembling. "But she's not done. She's planning something to take you down." I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" Mark hesitated, glancing around the room like he was afraid someone might be listening. "She's talking about suing you. For defamation, emotional distress, whatever she can come up with. She thinks if she drags you into court, she can humiliate you, maybe even squeeze some money out of you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Good luck to her. She's got nothing." "That's not all," Mark added, his voice lowering. She said if she can't destroy you legally, she'll find another way." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. I clenched my fists under the table, a familiar anger bubbling to the surface. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "What do you have to gain?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "I've lost everything too, James. My wife, my job, my reputation. It's all gone. And I know it's my fault. But Laura, she's dangerous. She doesn't care who she hurts, as long as she gets what she wants. I'm telling you because you deserve to know." I studied him for a long moment, trying to decide if he was being sincere or just covering his own ass. "And what do you suggest I do?" "Be prepared," he said. "She's unpredictable, and when people like her have nothing left to lose, that's when they're the most dangerous." As Mark left, I couldn't shake the unease his words had planted in my mind. Laura had already tried to destroy me once, and it seemed she wasn't finished. But if she thought she could pull me back into her chaos, she was in for a rude awakening. Mark's visit left me unsettled. As much as I hated the guy, there was something in his voice, an urgency, a fear, that I couldn't ignore. Laura wasn't just a bitter ex anymore. She was a threat, and I wasn't going to wait around for her to make her next move. That night, I sat down with a notebook and began listing everything I needed to do to protect myself. If Laura wanted a fight, I'd make sure she had nothing to aim at. First on the list was my lawyer. I called him the next morning and laid everything out: the restraining order, the potential lawsuit, and Mark's warning about Laura's unpredictability. "She has no grounds to sue you for defamation or emotional distress," he said confidently. "The evidence you shared about her affair and theft was factual. Truth is the ultimate defense against defamation." "That's good to know," I said. "But what about the other stuff? What if she tries to frame me for something or spread more lies?" He paused for a moment. "We'll strengthen your defenses. Document everything: texts, calls, emails. If she contacts you directly, don't respond. Forward anything suspicious to me. And if she steps out of line, we'll hit back hard. It wasn't just reassurance, it was strategy. Next, I called my IT friend, the same one who had helped trace Laura's earlier fabrications. I wanted every piece of my digital life locked down. We updated all my passwords, enabling two-factor authentication on everything from my email to my bank accounts. I even had him install monitoring software on my devices to detect any suspicious activity. If she tries to hack you or mess with your accounts, you'll know, he said. For the first time, I felt like I was staying one step ahead. Laura's unpredictability worried me the most. If she was willing to fabricate emails and stir up drama with my job, there was no telling what she'd try next. I installed security cameras around my house, discrete ones that covered every entry point. I also added motion-activated lights and a smart lock system that sent alerts to my phone whenever someone approached the house. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Finally, I reached out to the people I trusted, friends, coworkers, even a few family members who had been in the loop about Laura's schemes. I let them know what was going on, not because I wanted sympathy, but because I wanted a network of eyes and ears. If she tries to contact you, let me know, I told them. Don't engage with her, just pass it on. They were more than willing to help, especially after hearing how far Laura had already gone. By the end of the week, I felt fortified, as if I'd built an invisible wall between myself and whatever chaos Laura might try to unleash. But there was still a part of me that couldn't let my guard down. People like Laura didn't just go away quietly, and I had a feeling her next move would be her boldest yet.